Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, member Yakino shares his interesting path to high finance, from attending a program in university that had him going to school in Italy, Hong Kong, and California, to breaking into a summer analyst role in London at a US bulge bracket investment bank. Listen how he navigated each transition and his tips on recruiting, as well as his thoughts on the differences between investment banking and megafund private equity in London. Enjoy. All right, Yakino, thanks so much for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Hi, Patrick. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So it'd be great if you could just give the listeners a short summary of your bio.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So born and raised in Italy originally, and then I moved to study business administration as a degree in a particular program that led me to study in 3 different continents across 4 years in a standard American 4-year degree. And eventually gaining a business administration degree from one of each. Immediately after that, I joined a Bulge bracket bank in their investment banking team, joining after the summer internship after my junior year. I stayed there for a little over 1 year, where I had the chance to work on mostly buy sides, both for financial sponsor as well as for a strategic buy side. And after that, I left to join a megafund, where I have been now for the last 14, 15 months, focused on industrial and healthcare opportunities. Both my banking and private equity experience have been in London, where I am still currently based.
Great. Perfect. I was going to ask, are you comfortable sharing what city? And you beat me to it. So let's start all the way back at your undergrad. So it was a pretty unique program, something where you got experience in 3 different continents, 3 different universities around the world. Do you mind sharing kind of where you were? Not the exact schools, but just what countries?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd love to hear just the difference between them, like what you felt culturally versus like academic rigor versus, were they all in English,
Yes, all in English.
They're all in English, but can you talk a little bit about the culture and then the program itself? You don't have to name it, but was it like 100 kids, 10 kids? What was it like? And then
definitely,
in the case our listeners or any of our listeners are interested in joining something similar.
Happy to. I think I joined during the second batch of this program, so it was very new, still, smoothing out all the bureaucracy and all the challenges, obviously, of having the kids moving across. We were a batch of around 45 students, which were admitted, around 15 from each of the 3 universities that we attended. Locations were Italy, Hong Kong, and California. And we moved together.
Did you say California was your favorite, right? The school in California? Yeah,
exactly. Which I guess goes into your previous points of differences across the different places. I don't know if there is also a factor that California was the first year, so during the following years, you always also looked back at it with a bit of nostalgia, and you're like, oh, the good old days.
Good old days. Before things got serious with job search and all that good stuff.
Exactly. As a freshman, as a freshman with...
so as a freshman, you were in California in the school here, and then you transitioned to Italy next?
Hong Kong.
To Hong Kong.
And then Italy junior, yeah. But I think your question was exactly on point, because probably what I would say the greatest value add of the program in my academic experience was not as much in the classrooms or the textbooks, because I think at the end of the day, the theoretical part can be learned even online. But it was really in understanding how different places, how different cultures, and how different education systems worked in 3 different places, and it was absolutely polar opposites. So My first year in the US, it was very much a more practical approach, with lots of group meetings, lots of presentation, public speaking, getting ahead of just what then probably a real work setting would be like, and then a less focus on just academic knowledge memorization and just test based quizzes and all the rest. And then it was quite different in Hong Kong, which was basically the opposite, and people were studying day and night to make sure they knew everything to the decimal and to the latest footnote of the book, because that was what the final grade would have been focused on. And then Italy was probably a bit of a mix, but still more skewed towards academics than group projects.
Interesting. So the most public speaking in the US.
Yes, as well as teamwork.
And so in your senior year, you get to decide where you go?
That is exactly right.
Out of the 45 kids, how many decided to go to the US?
41.
Wow.
If I remember correctly, I think there were 4 or 5 split, 2 in Hong Kong. And
why do you think that is? You think it's more competitive than the other in Hong Kong? Probably is not as much fun, or was it weather, or was it just the background? Because if that many came from, it was even initially, right? 15 kids.
Yeah, because around each uni gets to recruit around 15 students for the whole 45. So you have 15 from the Americas, 15 from
So was it
Asia,
because the American was it easier for everybody to do well there, and they could have a life, or what was the thought?
I think there is a bit of a factor in that.
Yeah.
Like maintaining my GPA in Hong Kong required more labor than what it did in the US.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is also a factor of the US being the first year. So,
the nostalgia factor you talked
change. Yeah, with this constant change, you want to change again after the third year. And so you go back to the first one, which is the one that you probably missed the most. There is fresh in your mind, if you want to put it that way. The weather, obviously, it's nice summertime all year round.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think given the nature of the program, the type of students that it attracted, I think most of us were more inclined to what I was saying earlier on, just challenging ourselves with group-based projects and more real-life scenario simulations,
mm-hmm.
rather than just going back to the library and memorize some more books.
So if I'm looking at this correctly, you were in Italy during your junior year, but tell me how, like, the financial recruiting, were you thinking investment banking from the beginning? And how did you prepare yourself knowing that you were sophomore year, you were in Hong Kong? Were you starting to kind of reach out to people knowing that you would be in Italy the following year?
So I think that worked out relatively well for me. Being Italian, I always assumed that I would have ended up working at least in Europe, and so the fact that my junior year was in Italy, I could recruit for Europe in the closest of the locations. So that made sense, and I think here is where the recruiting differences between the US and Europe become a bit more apparent, as I think the networking weight over an overall application is much more prominent in the US rather than in Europe. So here at the end of the day, sure, the fact that you can name drop a couple of people might give you a small boost, but I would say it's relatively small, as the process is very much structured. And if I think about my investment banking analyst class, or like what I have seen in the following year as I was on the other side, and so I was recruiting, the number of people that were getting in because of of a referral, because they knew somebody, was very, very small, and everybody was still having to go through the website application. So the fact that my sophomore year was in Hong Kong didn't impact me much.
Okay, yeah, that's good. So you were kind of starting your junior year in Italy, and then tell me a little bit about that whole process. Was it technical interviews? Were you flying to London to do this, or was it all done on campus? And you came from a target in Italy, so you probably did have some on-campus recruiting, I assume.
Yeah, there was. some campus recruiting, but it was mostly again informational, as in more of a marketing pitch by the banks, rather than actually having a an acceleration in the recruiting process. Because at the end of the day, I still went through every application portal online, and the recruiting really varied depending on the banks. Some of them have a first round on the phone, second round in their Milan office, and then a third round, which was the final with the assessment center in London. Or some of them were like the one that I ended up joining, just called me straight up saying, we have an assessment center next weekend. Can you make it? And so it was one single round, effectively, directly the final one.
And you'd have to fly to London for that?
Exactly. Yeah. The final round is always, anyways, in London.
So it's just an assessment center thing, or do you actually have to do like a super day type thing where you're meeting with people there?
So I think that the assessment center is a bit of both, because it's a series of interviews at the end of the day. So it's not an entire day; it's a half day.
Yeah.
Where we have and the one that I did at least had a numerical test, a group case study with other three students that were interviewing on that day.
Let's talk about that. The group case study. That's got to be stressful. That's like they do that in business school now, applications. Tell me about that. Like, how did that go? What did they ask you?
Yeah, it's really odd dynamic, right? Because you need to balance being proactive and showing that you can be a leader in the room and show your opinion, with at the same time being careful to not oppress other people's opinions. So it's really a fine balance between showing leadership and being a team player in what is a 30-minute setting with three people that you have never met in your life, and where there is no right or wrong answer. So, for example, in our case study, we were given three options on where to open a new branch of the bank, and we were asked to pick one. So, also something probably that we would not be faced on our first few years on the job.
And did they give you some statistics or some numbers around where you should open a branch, or like what? It was like a full-on case, like a marketing consulting case, and you had to basically give reasons. Was there any disagreement with your people, or did everyone kind of cohesively decide where to open?
Yeah, we were given a few statistics, like a distance from the city center, distance from recruiting areas, commute opportunities to get there, and all the likes. I can't remember exactly now if there was strong disagreement, but I do remember that within 15 minutes, the team, we had 30 minutes total. Within half of the time, me and the other students ended up picking one location so that we could spend the remaining 15 minutes deciding on how to present it and on how to justify our choice, right? Because as I said, there is no right or wrong answer. Every location was excellent on something and poor on something else. So it was just about what do we want to prioritize, and how do we justify that is our prioritization.
Got it. Did you feel like, were you one of the first ones to speak up, or did you kind of let somebody else take the lead and then kind of gradually come in? What would you suggest candidates that find themselves in these very, very stressful, kind of odd group dynamic interviews? What do you suggest they do?
So the advice that I got at the time was to not push to be the leader in the room, because it can come off wrong from who's looking at you. Because maybe I forgot to say, there are the three people that are going to interview you later are just sitting there at the back of the room and looking at the entire thing, just like a Big Brother TV show sort of thing, just to enhance a bit the awkwardness of the situation. And so I followed that advice, and I was just trying to be proactive and putting my voice out there, but never coming off too strongly, or let's just say I was trying to speak second rather than speak first, and it worked out well for me. I got the offer the same like as I was leaving the door.
Were you one of the only three people that got the offer, the room?
Out of the three people in the room, yes. That accepted them. I don't know if the other.
The other two didn't end up with you in the summer internship.
Exactly.
Let's put it that way. So you were given an offer right as you're walking out of the room?
I got a call.
right away.
as I was getting to the airport. Yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So that's pretty exciting for you, I'm sure. So you kind of okay. So you did the numerical test as well, which I know there are drills and there are sites that help you kind of prep for that. Um, you're doing that. You felt good. You did the group setting. Was that it? And then were there any meetings with one-on-one with the bankers or two-on-one?
Yes.
You said half day.
1-on-one. Like the three people that were at the case
Got
study,
it.
then interviewed you back to back.
And this was junior. This was your junior year, like during the fall before summer, like the.
Exactly. We're talking about September, October.
Okay, so did you have other offers or other interviews lined up in London?
Yes, I had a few situations that were moving forward, all bulge brackets. Maybe, and here's something that I constantly debate, like how loyal do you need to be with these things? I try to push the other interviews faster after I got the offer to see if
Yeah.
I could like try to get some leverage within the period that I had to sign my first offer. Again, maybe this is a different with the US, as I got the feeling that here the programs are a bit more structured. As I was saying earlier, like less referral, much more application based and all the
Yeah.
likes. And so effectively, the other firm said, we haven't started assessment centers yet. The first one is in 3 weeks.
Right. And how much you had 2 weeks to accept?
Exactly, 2 weeks to sign my offer. So the things were not going to align. I was happy with the offer I got at the end of the day. American bulge bracket, not tier one, but it was good enough that I did not want to risk ending up with nothing in my hands, and so I
Yeah.
just signed and I canceled the other interviews.
Yeah, they have this saying in the US. I don't know if you heard the saying, bird in the hand's worth two in the bush.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you had the offer in hand, so you took it. And did you accept on the spot, or you waited a little bit so if you could maybe accelerate things and it just didn't work out, so then you accepted like a week
Yeah,
later?
exactly. I tried to accelerate with the others. They told me that, look,
Not happening. Okay.
they're not at the final stage with anybody yet, so we can't bring because of the team settings, right? Like they need multiple applicants to be at the assessment center stage at the same time, and they said we don't have enough candidates to push an assessment center forward at this for the next 3 weeks. So that's why I ended up signing.
So then as you get there, so you finish up your junior year in Italy and kind of probably feeling good because you have a summer internship lined up, but are you stressed out? What's your feeling going into the summer internship? And then tell me a little bit about how the summer progressed in London. You had never lived in London, I assume, and it was, another new city.
Yes.
Now at an American bulge bracket bank in London. What was that like?
That was exciting. I think the summer internship, you have a clear goal at the end, so you don't mind the hours of the work or anything, or even if the full timers try to scare you and they're like, oh yeah, I haven't slept in 2 weeks, and you're just like, oh, that sounds awesome, right? Like that's exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life. And
So how bad were the hours for real when that summer?
well, I can't really complain because summer internship was protected actually, and it was actually like the restriction were actually strictly followed by everybody. So there was absolutely no weekend work and no work past midnight. So
And I think that was especially stringent in the bank. Yeah, because I think this was closer to a time when there had been some stuff going on in the mid teens, 2000s, where there had been some deaths in London at certain banks. And so both in the US and in London, I think this is kind of when around the period when everyone started doing all these different programs, right? Like pencils down on Friday and like no Saturdays and all this stuff, and even protection for the interns, right? So you're saying it was strictly followed that summer. So that makes a huge difference. So you're working probably, you know, 15-hour days, Monday through Friday, but then we really didn't even come in the office on the weekend.
absolutely, I remember clearly one associate emailing HR asking if I could work the weekend. on an RFP that was due the Monday after, and HR replying, absolutely not. This is not allowed. The intern cannot be working on the weekend.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I wondered, have you heard anything lately if that's still the case? If it's as strict? I know because I know at least on Wall Street Oasis, we've been seeing with COVID, we've been seeing a huge swell of complaints from the junior side and people pushing back on some of the things that aren't being protected, aren't being enforced. And so, Goldman increasing the pay, everyone's increasing the pay now across the board, or doing something to try and make the juniors happier because COVID was especially tough work from home. So yeah, have you felt like it's softened in the because you were there 4 or 5 years ago? So has it softened? Has it been?
Well, my internship was 4 years ago, but then I was there until effectively 2 years ago when I was then working full time. And when I was full time, the restriction, the protection for the interns were still very much enforced.
Wow. Okay.
We didn't have like my bank did not have any protection for full timer.
Oh, rough.
So only as interns.
So the full-time analysts are still getting it pretty good in terms of hours, like 90 plus hours a week.
Yeah, the full package. Although I think that's up to for discussion whether, in my opinion, whether having Saturdays off is actually beneficial, because having Saturdays off then implies that Sunday is part of the week.
It's like an 18-hour workday.
Exactly. Whereas and even if you don't really have that much, at that point Sundays is part of the week, right? Because your weekend has been narrowed down to Saturday. Whereas in places that have no restrictions, such as the place where I was at, if you have little to do, you can either balance it out whenever you prefer, Saturday or Sunday. And if you have absolutely nothing to do, then you get the entire weekend and you can just travel around, because Sunday you're not on call, like, anyways.
Yeah. It almost forces Sunday to be used because people feel like they're going to lose that. Then the seniors aren't going to have that Saturday to work you, so they make sure you're busy on Sunday.
Exactly. So
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Up for debate, I guess.
Yeah, that is interesting. So tell me a little bit about London, like nightlife. Was it fun? Was it different? I mean, you had traveled you've been in Italy, you've been in Hong Kong, you've been in California. What was it like? I mean, you're now in a big city.
Training in New York. So
training in New York was a party, I'm sure.
Exactly. So can compare from a few places.
Yeah. What did you think? Because I know London. I mean, I trained in London at Rothschild, and it was a real fun time out there.
I'm sure.
Was it like? I mean, I know they have those clubs. I can't remember what they're called, the clubs or whatever in London. Was it something where you guys were there like every weekend in the summer when you were your summer analyst? Since you weren't working, I mean, I can't imagine. It must have been amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's like the comparison that I can make across cities is not entirely fair, because obviously the budget for a night out has increased over time.
Very different when you were a freshman, right, in California versus when you were a summer analyst. So yeah, tell me a little bit about whatever. Like, was it fun in London?
Absolutely no. I love the city. I think there is a place for every hour of the night. So there is never a risk of being bored here. I think we have found, like, me and my group of friends have found our favorite place to go to, Cirque Soir. If anybody goes to London, yes, I'm doing marketing for them right now, but I think it's totally worth it. It's a bit odd. They have a show midway, but I think that's a bit common for London clubs to have like
a performance in the middle of it.
Exactly, like the higher end clubs do, whether it's Cirque, the Box, or Tape, which are like a trio of famous clubs here in London. They all have performances in the middle. And here, I think, similar to New York, the clubs close at around 2-3 a.m. But then obviously there is the after party places. I must say, personally, I don't go as much, because, like, I think that's where I draw the line between having fun and being able to function the next day in case the call comes in. But But yeah, London is also really good for that, and there are a few that I have been once or twice. And so if you want a full night to see the sunrise, definitely can stay out until then. And then we have the 24-hour breakfast places. Favorite one, Duck and Waffle, which is on the 43rd floor of the Salesforce Tower and has a great sunrise view. So
That's cool.
if you need to go back to the office, it's a great place to.
Some good tips here for the people who are going to London for the first time. Awesome. That's cool. Yeah. So I never worked in London, so this is all new to me. But yeah, tell me a little bit about just so you had a real fun time during your summer analyst stint, didn't have to work as crazy hours, and you go back for senior year to California, correct?
That's correct.
And so again, another big move, and you're basically out there it's having a great time because you got a full-time offer, I assume, at the end of your summer internship.
Exactly.
And so tell me about all the brain damage you've done to yourself with all the partying you had for the last 2 years. No, just kidding. So tell me a little bit about just tell me a little bit about that kind of going into senior year. Was it something where you accepted right on the spot once they gave you the offer, or was it something where you tried to again leverage or trade up?
I didn't try to leverage my full-time offer. I thought at that point I was comfortable with the bank and the team that I was joining, and I liked the thought of joining people that I already knew and I had already worked with. That was giving me some security, some sense of security for when I had to join full-time, rather than having to build again everything from scratch if I were to go to a different bank. So I signed in a couple of days, just the time to put my things in order, and then as you were correctly hinting, it was probably the best year of my life. Very little concerns about anything because job was secured. I wanted to keep my GPA because that was important to me, but again, I thought that the US school system was a bit easier maybe than the other two. So I was in the right place to keep the GPA with minimal effort. And yeah, at that point it was just about enjoying my time there and creating memories. So yeah, lots of parties. I traveled around a bit. Obviously went to Vegas.
Nice. You play poker? Do you play poker?
Let's just say no. If anybody then challenges me, I have an excuse for how bad I play.
Fair. Okay, so you're
went to football games, tailgatings. I love
yeah,
that entire aspect of the US education. That's just
for
something that
sure,
we should bring to Europe because it's amazing.
for sure. So you graduate and you immediately kind of move back to London for full time, or how was your transition there? And then tell me a little bit about the when the reality of the lifestyle hit you working the hours, because you were a little bit protected as an intern. That protection is gone. Was it like a big shock, like 2 months in, 3 months in, you're out of training? Talk to me a little bit about that, and then just the training itself. Do you feel like you were able to ramp up quickly because you had enough financial modeling training and all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. So I graduate in May 18. I go back home for just a couple of weeks, and then mid-June, I leave for London to drop my stuff, and we're all flown out to New York for a month or so of training and partying mostly. But I think during training, I had a bit of an advantage in the sense that I came from the summer internship. I didn't study finance per se, but still business, so somewhat related. I had an understanding of the broader financial aspects, and as well, obviously using the very helpful guides and courses from Wall Street Oasis. I thought I was in a good spot when I started day one of the
Yeah,
job.
too bad we didn't have our financial modeling training launched yet, but you had the interview courses and whatnot back there, so that's good. That's good that we were helpful. Okay.
Yeah, the guides were crucial. I think
Thank
I
you.
probably passed my accounting exam mostly because of the accounting guide rather than the book. So I think I think that it really prepared for the interview, and then some
Great.
understanding as well of the job. So that was helpful. but as you said, then yeah, like we had quite a hit the reality wall of the hours quite soon. So I was leaving. I was living with my flatmate was also an intern with me, and then was starting full time together with me. And on day 4 of the job, so we start on a Monday. On Thursday, he doesn't come back home, and I see him again on Friday at the bank on Friday morning. So he got this the hours are not protected anymore reality check quicker than me. For me,
He pulled his first all nighter on day 4.
exactly.
Wow,
Whereas for me, I think it was a bit more of a
the ramp.
took. I never did a real all nighter. I think the latest that I left the bank was 5.5, and then be back at around 10. So not sure where you categorize that, but I still did
Still pretty
go
bad, but
home
yeah.
for a couple of hours of sleep. And funnily enough, I did instead have an all-nighter after I moved to the buy side. So I'm not sure what we should, if how
How
the
did that
quality of
happen?
that
Yeah.
is.
So okay, so you're working on some deals, you're getting some live deal experience. Tell me about the private equity recruiting process in London, how it worked out for you. Um, you know, through the traditional recruiting channels, was it through another channel? And you're at a megafund now, so I'd love to just hear what that process, because I know in the US there's on cycle, whereas in London it seems to be a little bit much or significantly later.
Yeah. Like I hear from friends in the US, they have a buy side offer after their internship and before they have even started the job, which is something here definitely doesn't, at least I've never heard.
Yeah, it's like over 2 years out.
Exactly. I think here is a more of, let's say, I don't know what the exact word is, but let's say tailored to the spot, like a recruiting process. So, oh, we need somebody, and usually is, oh, we need somebody that speaks this language. And so they start the recruiting for that, but it's not that they plan recruiting and have somebody joining, 12 or 24 months down the line. And that
Yeah.
is exactly how it happened for me. Super standard recruiting process. I was approached by recruiting agencies because here it's all through intermediaries.
Yeah, who are the big ones out there?
So I think the ones that I had a good experience with, Kia consultants, probably market leaders in junior placements.
Mm-hmm.
Walker Hamill also has some good positions. Blackwood also is more and more present, I think, coming up recently. Those are the 3 that are on top of my head right now.
Sure. Fair.
Kia is the one that placed me, that reached out saying that my fund was having a breakfast event. They put forward CVs to the fund. The fund then invites 25, 30 people. We go there. There is a bit of a presentation, some food.
That's gonna be a little bit awkward. Like, are you forced to eat breakfast or pretend like you're eating?
Yeah, you're there like sipping your coffee and deciding whether it's always like, oh, if I eat a croissant then I can't speak, but then if I'm not eating breakfast and I'm not speaking to anybody,
And there's
it's
crumbs all over your suit. Yeah. Yeah, I always find that's awkward. Like you almost need to eat beforehand, so you don't need to eat there and just drink coffee or whatnot.
It's curious that you mentioned. Now I can't remember if I ate anything or not. I surely had a coffee though.
For sure. Yeah, I think the adrenaline of the whole situation probably can keep you going for a while. But so yeah, tell me about what was that breakfast like? So you said 25 to 30 people. How many spots are they looking to fill? Like 5 or 3?
2.
Just 2. Wow. So it's super competitive. So how do you even get that? I mean, you landed one, but do you know those numbers going into this, or is it super intimidating when you get there and it's like almost 30 kids going for 2 spots?
Well, I think there is a bit of also of people then deciding that it's not the thing for them. So out of those 30, how many of them are actually then going to go through the recruiting process, and how many of them then get the offer?
I would assume pretty high though. I would assume like 80% of them, right?
Uh, Possibly. Like I knew one guy, like when I got to the breakfast, I only knew one other person from another bulge bracket. And
Yeah.
after we chatted, he was like, yeah, this is not for me. And then because he decided to go more for a growth fund.
Got it.
So yeah, I would assume that lots of people try to get out, and go to private equity. But for example, like in that instance, the guy was looking for a different opportunity.
So you didn't finish your 2 years at Bulge Bracket because was this just a surprise? You'd have to be opportunistic and take it when it comes. I think I've heard in London it's typically after 2 or 3 years at the bank that you recruit. So this seems like an early jump, more than at least earlier than typical. What's typical?
Mine was an early jump, yes. I think in London it used to be 3 years, and then obviously banks have shortened the analyst program to 2 years. I think all bulge brackets in London now are on a 2 year stint, and therefore obviously also buy side recruiting has shifted a bit earlier because at the end of the day, like compensation from analyst to entry level in the buy side, from analyst at the bank to entry level in the buy side is a massive jump. From associate at the bank, given all the bonuses that are staggered in a 12 months period with your promotion, your analyst 2 bonus, your promotion bonus, your stub bonus in December because your bonus cycle shift from summer to year end.
Yeah.
Pay jump to associate, and then immediately after, again, the full time bonus as associate. It's a lot of money coming in a 12 months period. So I think obviously the buy side also had to shift earlier the recruiting because
they didn't want you to start. They didn't want you to start having those golden handcuffs and be stuck in banking as much.
Exactly.
But I mean, but that's pretty short sighted for people to stick around necessarily in banking if they really want to do buy side. It's such a different, it's a different role. It's just a different job, right?
Oh, I agree entirely. I think I think it's the two jobs are not really comparable. Even the Excel modeling is entirely different. Like I found that the most complex model that I built while I was an analyst at the bank is probably 10 times simpler than anything that we build for a round 2 here. Like just the level of granularity and the level of understanding that you need to have on any single assumption. You really need to be able to justify it because at the end of the day, that's also your money if you co-invest in the fund, but it's more than your reputation on the line.
Yeah, it's very different when you're putting numbers together for a client where it's not your own money versus at a mega fund. They want to make sure every number is correct and you're actually looking at things, doing the revenue build up properly, doing all the assumptions, looking at all this, every single assumption, turning it over. So that's interesting. You say the Excel, some people would say at private equity funds, the modeling's less important. It's more about like the investment thesis and the, on getting through running the diligence streams and all of that stuff. Would you say that, obviously the PowerPoint is probably less important, right?
Definitely.
It doesn't matter how pretty it is. What matters is if it's right or not, right?
Yeah, that's entirely right, and I also agree with your point that at the end of the day, doing the proper diligence and understanding an opportunity commercially is what's going to make or break a deal. If you missed an item in the QE, or if
QE being quality of earnings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Just for the listeners who don't know. Yeah.
If you miss an item there.
And explain what is the quality earnings. Just basically an accounting firm will do an analysis of the earnings of the revenue of everything all the way down to make sure that it's legitimate. Is that basically what it is?
Yeah, mostly at the EBITDA level is where we focus on, just to make sure that there are that your jump off point on the EBITDA that you're taking, and so the profitability of the business is representative. Because particularly now with COVID, it's difficult to take the last 12 months performance of a business and just saying that this is representative of how it's going to perform over a 5-year investment horizon period.
For sure.
Some business benefited, some business obviously didn't, and it's important to get to what could be a run rate scenario and where the business could go from today.
Yeah, really interesting. So tell me a little bit more. What else is different? What about the difference? Talk a little bit about the culture shift from banking to private equity and what you felt like was the hardest part of the transition for you.
Oh, that's a good one. I do think that the culture is very different. I think you're probably being a smaller office, smaller team, when you compare it to a bulge bracket bank, there is more of a humanization of the people around you. and the understanding that there is more to life than work, even at the junior level. And so
your hours are what, 60 to 70 there?
I guess I would say that's fair. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Just a
I
guess.
think, but I think the difference is also in the quality of the hours, right? So, for example, with the other associates for lunch, we all go out and then eat together. So you take half an hour, 1 hour out. Whereas at the bank, it was we're taking takeaways and we are eating at the desk all by ourselves in our own cubicles, right?
Yeah.
That sort of things. It's not just about the quantity of the hours, but the quality of those hours, and
For sure.
that's what I meant when a bit more social interactions at the office. Although I must say that one thing that most banks do, and I haven't seen, at least on my fund, or I don't know if it's just a generalization for other buy side places as well. For example, the Friday drinks is not really a thing, at least in my fund. Whereas at the bank, it was. There was just a common understanding that at 6 p.m. everybody was leaving, meeting at the square, at the bar, at the pub, where all teams from the bank were going for a pint and then going back to the office, obviously. But that was something that we had at the bank. Whereas here,
was it a pint or was it 4 pints and then trying to get back to the where I wouldn't be able to work if I had more than a pint? Even if I had a pint, don't the analysts like fall asleep after a pint?
well, exactly. It depends how much work you have to do and how good self-control you have. But
I can imagine. I can't even imagine if you're on like 3 hours sleep, having a pint in like 6 p.m. after, and then dinner. Like my face would just smash on the keyboard.
I did remember a couple of times where I was having maybe 2 or 3 pints too many, and then as I was finishing my last one, I was delivering like I don't know 2 pizzas to the office to get the carbs to
Oh
just
yeah,
sober up quickly and finish what I had to do.
that's
But yeah,
funny.
those are what we were saying before, the good old days. It always worked out fine.
Very cool. So talk to me a little bit about kind of what's next. I mean, you're at a mega fund. I know it's very tough to move up, get promoted. What are the typical paths that people always talk about exit opportunities from investment banking to private equity, but then people rarely talk about the exit paths from private equity. I mean, obviously the dream for a lot of people is to kind of just move up, but with the fund as it grows, as they raise more capital to become a director or a principal, then a director, then a partner eventually. But tell me a little bit about what's what's your thought? Are you thinking this is a path to something else? Is this a path to stay around for long run?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would like to stay around. As you were hinting before, the traditional structure for private equity is 2 years up or out, and my fund is the same. So my 2 years is coming up at the end of 2021, and so then it's when I will have to make a decision, or will be forced to make a decision if things were not to work out in my favor, unfortunately.
How much time do they give you to make that decision? Because you're only 7 months away.
Yeah, so in 7 months they'll give me the notice, and then I have 6 months of where the employment is still ongoing,
Got it.
and there's this common understanding that I will obviously be looking for other things.
And what are typically mega fund private equity associates that don't get the offer to continue? What do they typically go on to do out of London?
So what the recruiters have told me, and I am sure that this is bias on their own interests, is that it's not uncommon for associates to switch fund after 2 years, both whether they received or not the opportunity to continue their current fund. Um, Obviously, if they haven't, then they need to change if they want to stay in the industry. Whereas what the recruiters were saying is lots of people jump at the first buy side opportunity because they want to get out of the bank, and then in their 2 years they realize maybe the investment strategy is not the right fit for them, or they want to move at a different stage of maturity of companies, and so after 2 years they take the opportunity to change to a different fund that is more aligned with what they want to do long term.
Mm-hmm.
But I like my current fund. I like the culture. I like what we do. I like the people. So hopefully I will be able to stay. And in that case, I'm not sure whether I'm going to be in PE until I die, but definitely for the foreseeable future.
How do you think you get that offer? How do you get that offer to stay? And as a private equity associate, do they just call you a senior associate at that point, or do they call you a principal typically? I don't know, change. It's different fund by fund, but in your third, after that second year, if they at the end of the year they say we'd like you to stay for, do they say usually we'd like to stay for a third year? Do they say we'd like to stay 2 more years? Do they say we'd like you to be on partner track? What's that conversation typically look like if you heard?
So I think at that point is the contract becomes on an ongoing basis. So there's no promise either way, and I think at that point it's really performance based. So you perform, you continue moving up. You slightly performed, or don't really know how to put it, then maybe you're a bit parked.
Yeah, but how do they even judge you? How do they even judge you? I just think it's so political at assuming you're not messing up the numbers, assuming you're a friendly person, if there's, let's say, 10 associates, megafund associates that are going through, the reality is what? Only 2 or 3 of them are going to be moving on, right? Or is it more?
Yeah, look, I totally agree with you. I think the generally, and I'm not sure whether it's just PE at the associate level. I think the reviewing process is a bit flawed because everybody's different, and you're just trying to rank people that maybe cannot be ranked together because my strengths are your weaknesses and your weaknesses are my strengths. So in the eyes of whoever ranks you and I together, if he cares more about A, he's going to rank you first. If he cares more about B, he's going to rank me first. But the reality is that we should both be ranked the same and work together because we're complementary to each other. But I think we're moving a bit of in a utopia scenario.
I think it's tough. Yeah, I think it's really tough to know how to actually rank associates because a lot of them are going to have all the technical skills, are going to be running deals. I guess maybe it's a little bit of like how much of a leadership you take on specific deals, what deals you get placed on, a little bit of luck in terms of whether those deals did well or not. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you touch on that. One comment that I heard is making a deal changes your career both internally and externally. But if you really think about it, as an associate, making a deal is not exactly within my powers. I can do my best on it, but then I'm not going to be the one that pulls the trigger at the end or that pushes it through IC.
Right.
So
yeah, very cool. Anything else you'd like to share with the listeners before we call it? Any other words of wisdom, kind of looking back on your career and your path so far?
Well, maybe since I'm looking at a friend who's recruiting right now, and I'm seeing the difficulties and challenges that she's having, is probably just really to think about where you want to be and what you want to do and the reasons why you want to make the change. I think lots of people may have this idealized perception of the buy side as, the greener pastures where money just flows into your pocket. The hours are absolutely 9 to 5, only Monday to Wednesday, and they serve you oyster and champagne, lunch and dinner. The reality is obviously still a lot of work. It's very stressful. I think it's the level of responsibility that you're given is higher from day one compared to what it was, at least for me, at the bank, and the type of work is also very different. And I think the word exactly is different. It's not necessarily better. It's just whether it's more aligned with what you want to do in your life and who you want to be, and what sort of work. So I think the only word of advice that I would give anybody who's in banking or consulting and think about making a move to private equity is just, am I doing it for the right reasons? Have I thought about the differences from my current job to the next one? And lastly, just look around, different funds are very different, both in terms of culture, philosophies, the way that they look at opportunities. As we were saying before, like, sure, the Excel is important. There are some funds that are purely commercially driven. So I agree, maybe their Excel are really simple, and some other funds that are very much that work around lots of financial engineering to make the returns. And so in that sense, it's going to be a lot of a number crunch in Excel. So not all buy side is the same, and not necessarily the buy side is better than the current job. So
yeah, it's great advice. You had mentioned money growing on trees, or money getting thrown at you left. Can we talk about pay just for a second before we call it? So you're coming in, you kind of missed your second bonus, your analyst stint, because I think you left early, but was the pay, you might share just around it, and at least in pounds, what it was there, and then kind of the pay bump coming up to private equity associate? And you can give a range, you don't have to give it exact.
Yeah, sure. Regarding my bonus, I left after 1 month and a half, 2 months of my year one being paid. So I didn't accrue much. So
yep.
It wasn't really a concern for me. As you were saying before, now everything got bumped up. So my statistics from my investment banking analyst are a bit outdated, and I can give exact figures because I think everybody knows, and that there are surveys and they're public.
Yeah, and we have the company database that has all the data in there. If listeners want to go take a look. But what was it for you like?
My first year was 50,000 base pounds, and the second one was 60,000. I think now that is being moved up by 10% or so at the bank from the latest conversation with people there. And bonus as an analyst could go up to 100%. I don't know anybody that ever got more than 100%, but I know that the top
it's around 30 to 50,000 pounds, around there.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what about private equity?
So my current fund is North American based, and my salary is fixed in USD with the conversion rate that changes every year. So we have a 1 year visibility over the exact number that we're going to get, and then it's gonna vary for the next year. I am up for a 15% decrease in pay because the pound is just rallying in the past couple of months.
You're like, no.
I was just there looking at it. I was getting notifications saying pound at 2 years high, and I was like, wonderful.
Oh my gosh! So wait, what are you getting paid in USD then?
But in USD, my base is in between 100 and 140, and the bonus is 1.4 to 1.6 times my base.
That's great. Yeah, it's a great first year, less than 3 years out of school, making good money.
Yeah, I can't complain.
Yeah, even with the erosion with the exchange rate, and that's interesting. They only set it once a year.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a bit of a balance.
That may change after this year. All the London employees will be like, "What is this?"
Well, everybody. Well, not for me because I wasn't working back then. But I think when was Brexit announced? 2016. It
was great.
So 5 years ago. Like, obviously, all these people got a 50%, like 50 increase, not 15% decrease as now. So ups and downs.
Yeah, you have a little exchange rate risk. That's fun. You can probably hedge it a little bit with some other ways, interesting ways, but
get the bonus paid in USD, which I might plan on doing this summer. Also easier to co-invest in the fund because obviously co-investments would be in USD, so might as well not pay all this transaction.
Yeah, is there any carry for private equity associates pre-MBA or anything like that, or any just co-invest opportunity? And what do they let you do?
Just co-invest opportunities.
Just co-invest. Okay.
As associates, yes.
Very cool. Well, listen, Yakino, really appreciate the time you spent sharing all your wisdom and information and story. It's been a blast.
Thank you for having me, Patrick. My pleasure.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, Patrick at wallstreetoasis.com. Until next time.